Hey guys, and welcome back to the ASX Investor channel, and welcome to another interview. Today, we'll be exploring a really fascinating sector. We're all familiar with not only the EV adoption, but the real focus around the world to transition towards a broader decarbonised society. We know that nickel and cobalt are key critical materials that will really help to facilitate that transition. But today we'll be exploring the story of Jervois Global. They're developing quite an interesting project at the moment. They've acquired 3 assets over the past period. They've really assembled a world-class leadership team, and they're hoping to develop out a really significant player of scale in both the nickel and cobalt space. We're really grateful to be joined by James May, the CFO of Jervois Global. It's ASX JRV. Looking forward to unpacking both the sector demand as well as the project that you guys are developing at Jervois. Welcome to the channel, mate.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure. Look, there's plenty of news flow, plenty of different developments for us to discuss, but I think as we delve into it, if you can just give that overview of who Jervois is and really how you've developed into the place that you are today.
Yeah, sure. I'll start with the introduction. Jervois is a company that had been around on the ASX for a long time, but really undertook a significant transformation around 2017. Part of that transformation was the installation of a new management team, a new board, and really in the years that followed, we've continued to sort of build capability amongst the leadership group. Many of the key management figures, and including our CEO and on the board as well with our chairman, have come out of the Glencore Xstrata sort of stable. We've already come from big companies, really to try and harness this opportunity that's ahead of us in battery materials, and really leverage deep experience in mining metals, trading, and specifically cobalt and nickel to build out a real high quality portfolio. And so really what's been happening in the last few years is the build out of a portfolio through 3 significant M&A transactions that lead us to where our core portfolio is today. And so in 2019, Jervois acquired a company called Cobalt that was the owner of the ICO Cobalt project in the United States. And what we've done with that since is that we've updated some studies. We've got construction well underway. It's in the advanced stage now. It's fully funded, and we were just pleased to announce recently that we're bringing that asset into production, or we've confirmed the pathway to production in 2022. And when it comes online, that will be America's only cobalt asset. So really sort of strategically significant source of primary cobalt that will sit there in the United States. Wind the clock forward from 2019 to 2020, we announced another acquisition structure, this time in Brazil. There's a refinery that's been on care and maintenance, a nickel and cobalt refinery, was on care and maintenance under the former ownership of the diversified Brazilian group called Votorantim. They ran that refinery successfully for many years, but in a manner that was integrated with their a nickel mine they also owned, and that resource depleted. The asset went into care and maintenance. We managed to get a front seat in an engagement process, and really since there we announced an acquisition structure in late 2020. And what that really means in practice is that we've continued to do studies whilst paying a lease payment to the owners, and then subject the outcome of the studies that we are looking to publish at the end of Q1 2022. What we're looking at there is the restart of that refinery, and really working with both the ability to bring nickel intermediate product down from the US and the asset just described, combine that with some third-party nickel feedstock, and really sort of chart that path towards a long-term restarted operation of what is South America's only nickel and cobalt refinery, all the while servicing this demand in EVs and broader metals that you referred to at the beginning. And then if I just wind the clock forward again, this year it's been a big year for us. We've got a number of activities, but really at the heart of that was an acquisition of operating business. So we bought the residual cobalt processing business that Freeport McMoran sold, Freeport being a big diversified US global mining group. And we purchased the cobalt processing division that they had in Kokkola, Finland. And so what that business does, it brings in cobalt hydroxide in an intermediate form. We then bring that through into a refinery and then ultimately into a downstream production process. And then we transform those cobalt units into many, many different types of refined cobalt that service both traditional industrial sectors and also the growing sector as well. That is generating EBITDA and cash flow today. and really what it does between having that asset now at the core of our portfolio and then two very near-term development assets that I described in the US and Brazil. What we're really assembling is a very sort of neat package and strong portfolio of Western world focused assets to really provide that non-China supply chain alternative to Western world consumers of our products.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've heard you and the team previously describe it as the real industrial logic, and you see that with the different types of assets that you're assembling across the portfolio. I'd love to ask as well, before we unpack some of the strategic rationale behind each of them, we know the commodities, obviously, they're a function of supply and demand. I'd love just to hear about the outlook that you guys are looking at in terms of the nickel and cobalt space and why you think there's such an opportunity moving forward for these different commodities.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and good question. And look, a lot of this demand growth that's coming, as you know, it mostly originates with the electrification thematic, particularly the growth of electric vehicles in key markets across China, Europe, and the US. And really from there, you see this sort of pull through into demand for these metals through the requirement to use these metals in battery chemistries, particularly in the development of cathodes, which is sort of a core part of the batteries that will go into electric vehicles. And what we see when we look ahead is we know there's a good sort of spectrum of battery technologies. There are some that are some will have heard of on this watching this would have heard of LFP, for example, and then others will have heard of the alternate, which is the high nickel battery cathode chemistries. But very much where you've got a need for energy density and performance in vehicles, particularly as we see the growth ahead of us in developed markets. What we're looking at is a very significant demand growth profile for battery chemistries that are very heavy in terms of both nickel content, and where there's nickel, there's generally cobalt. Cobalt's a key ingredient in terms of providing thermal stability to battery technologies, which has really got a sort of a safety and performance role in that as well. So when we look at ahead and we look at credible third-party analyst forecasts, what you generally see is compound annual growth rates of 9 or 10%. So really strong demand outlook if you follow the logic around electric vehicles in a way that's largely unprecedented in the history. And in that context, we want to become significant participants in nickel and cobalt, really to try and capture that exposure to that growth cycle for our investors.
And just to help conceptualize it for the viewers as well, as we know, the EV sector is the fastest growing cohort out of the use cases for them. But of course, cobalt and nickel have key roles to play in the current economy. Can you just give that insight into the other types of use cases for them as well, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with cobalt. Cobalt, where we sell today into a range of traditional uses. So cobalt goes into everything from advanced manufacturing in aerospace, into chemicals, catalysts, pigments. And what we really like about a lot of those more traditional end uses is, whilst they don't have the stellar growth rates of the battery growth trajectory, really sort of high quality customers, very stable outlets for our products. And what I really like as CFO as well is diversification, that we're servicing a wide number of customer groups. We're not overly exposed in that product to any one group in particular. And then with nickel, you're absolutely right. There's if you look at the sort of breakdown of demand, key use there in terms of stainless steel and the historical use and growth driver of nickel. So that will continue to be a key relevant factor with sort of battery demand sort of becoming an ever greater share of the mix in terms of demand going forward, but always having that impact of stainless steel demand growth also being relevant in terms of the nickel supply demand dynamic going forward.
Yeah, and just building on what you mentioned before as well, we know there's a big discussion at the moment on the geopolitical front in terms of localization of supply chains. We're seeing it play out across a range of industries. Of course, the critical material space is not immune to that. And I'd love just to hear your thoughts on why you think it's so important. I think Jervois is on the path to being the second largest cobalt refiner outside of China. Why do you think that's so important? And how are you guys going to be able to feed into that supply chain?
Yeah, look, I think what a lot of players are looking at in the industry is a concentration of supply, and in cobalt, the concentration of mine supply is from the DRC, and the concentration of processing is in China. So what we're trying to do is really provide an alternative. We've got a cobalt mine that as I said, will come on in the US next year, and then refinery assets and manufacturing assets through sort of Finland and Brazil when it comes on. And so, from the perspective of a downstream customer, be it a cathode battery maker or an OEM, you want some diversification. With this sort of supply chain sort of issues we've seen globally, really since COVID, as well as the geopolitical sort of twists and turns in the world, the best strategy folks can have if you're looking to source these materials is have diversification. And therefore, what we're trying to do is really offer that diversification that we think will be valued by customers, and then do that all the while with a way that's very ESG credentialed. So what we're offering, and what we'll extend our offering as we bring the US and Brazil assets online, is really to ensure that we partner with our customers in a way where we've got products that are truly credential and truly sort of traceable from an ESG perspective. And we know increasingly that's going to be valued by end users as well, as we sort of move into this EV growth phase.
And I guess just having that bit of an insight across the 3 different assets, you're at a really unique time in the development of them. Idaho is moving towards the commercial production, I think by the back end of 2022 you're hoping for. Can you just give an update on how that's progressing? And is there any also any insights about potential resource expansion too moving forward if that comes successfully?
Yeah, absolutely. No, great questions, and very, very topical. We've just put out an update on ICO to the market, sort of reconfirming the schedule. Will deliver first ore, anticipate delivering first ore through that August sort of timeframe, and then with ramp up to first sustainable production in December 2022. So relatively near term. There's a lot of activity going on at site in terms of the underlying project. There's activity going on to construct the processing plant at site. The mine is underground. The underground mining contractor is got the tunnel into the side of the hill, and we're continuing with that mine development at pace through the winter months. So what I would say is a lot of activity. It's that classical sort of advanced construction stage that we can almost sort of see the finish line less than 12 months away now, but we just need to sort of keep moving through the milestones and keep managing risks as they arise, and confident that we'll be on track to deliver those production targets next year.
And then Sao Miguel Paulista, I think feasibility study is well underway now. I'm hoping to bring that one out of care and maintenance. Can you provide some insights about how that's progressing as well, please?
Yeah, sure. So, as I mentioned before, we've been doing a feasibility study around a restart. Now, there's a number of dimensions that sort of all into as you sort of contemplate a restart, both sort of commercially and technically. So we'll continue to sort of work through that. We've really got all the right people involved. We've got Asenco on the engineering side. We've got some external specialists helping with flowsheet design, and then really importantly, we've got a strong internal technical team to provide that sort of brains trust, and also work iteratively with the commercial team in terms of how we deal with some of the different elements. For example, around sourcing nickel, what the options are in terms of ultimately the sales outlets for the products as well. And so what we're looking to do is bring that together in an integrated way, so that we can communicate that FS to the market towards the end of Q1 2022 in that time frame.
And Freeport was one that I wanted to spend a little bit of time on. I know it's the most recent acquisition. I guess there's a few really interesting aspects of it. If you think about the customers that are already there, obviously the opportunity to get that upside as well. If the cobalt price continues to increase, that would have excited you as the Chief Financial Officer. I'd love just to hear that strategic rationale about the opportunities you're seeing with Jervois and where it can really go moving forward for Jervois Finland.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was a very, very exciting acquisition for us this year to have an operating business that's of high quality. It's a business that's been in operation a long time. Cobalt processing in that part of Finland has been started in 1968. Good quality business servicing long-term blue chip customers. And what I like about it, particularly as sort of CFO, is that the way that business is structured is that through its purchase agreements for supply that comes into the plant, and then through the sales model where we are linked to the cobalt price, it's configured in a way that in the down legs of the cycle that we've seen in recent years, the business is of sufficient quality. It doesn't lose money at that point, but equally it's got this sort of torque to the upside, and that's so it's quite sort of neat in terms of how it's structured, in terms of scope for financial outcomes. And what we've seen in the last sort of few weeks in particular is a sort of tailwind in the cobalt price. The cobalt price is now sort of north of $30 a pound, and we think that puts us in a good position for next year. So really, take a step back and our approach to that asset. We acquired it on 1st of September this year when we closed the acquisition after doing a big equity raise. We spent time over there with the management team, really getting under the skin of the business and going through that initial engagement that was already positive. Very well run business, good degree of automation in terms of the facility, a very strong engagement from the management team who will continue to sort of partner with in terms of finding what those growth opportunities are going forward. So what I would say is we're still in the first few months post ownership, but really sort of positive signs, not only that we have a good quality cash generating business, but there will be continued opportunities to look to sort of push the envelope on growth for that business as we look forward.
3 transactions over this past period. It's obviously been relatively busy. I've got to ask you as well, there's a focus now, there's a pretty defined pathway up ahead. Is there still opportunities? Are you still looking out for further M&A activity, or is it time to digest these businesses and really start to scale them? What's the thoughts over the next period?
Yeah, look, you're right. It has been busy. So if you think across sort of 2019 into 2020 and then this year, 3 M&A, quite a number of financing transactions as well. Our market cap has now grown to about $800 million, which has been good to see. And look, one of the main messages we're hearing from the market is to bed down, deliver the business plan. We recognise that ourselves. There's really critical milestones coming up, both in Idaho and Brazil in particular. So we really want that to be a strong and core focus. I think notwithstanding that, like a lot of players in the industry, should opportunities present opportunistically, we'll obviously continue to evaluate and maintain sort of our key principle that, if we do look again at some point in the coming sort of 12 or 24 months at M&A, that it'll always be with that sharp lens on value. We want to make sure we're very, very disciplined and use the word before industrial logic. We want to make sure there's very deep industrial logic for anything else we sort of do in terms of that M&A space. So the way I'd summarize it is that, focus number 1 is execute the business plan and continue to push on ICO and S&P and also the integration of the Finland business. But we'll keep a watching brief on M&A as we go along.
Exciting times up ahead. I've got to ask you as well, I'm sure you might have heard the phrase, potentially a mini Glencore in the making. The amount of kind of experience that is across the team, not only from Glencore, but from a range of leading institutions. It's really quite an incredible team that's been assembled. I'd love just to hear your thoughts on why everyone's come together. What is that opportunity that you've seen? And also, what do you think that really enables you to do as Jervois continues to scale moving forward?
Yeah, look, good question. Look, my observation, and I came out of Rio Tinto. I was there for 14 years before I joined Jervois. With your observation, we've got absolutely a strong Glencore cohort, ex-Glencore cohort, and strong sort of DNA around a Glencore sort of way of operating. But really, the observation I have is that if you look across the different sort of lanes of the business, be it technical, commercial, financial, operational, everyone's sort of super strong in those lanes sort of technically. But they're also passionate around operating in this sector at this time in terms of the cobalt and nickel space and really have an eye on that opportunity of how important servicing the CV growth is globally, but also how exciting it is to work in a business and commercial sense in this space. And so what it enables us to do and what we've sort of experienced is that we're really harnessing the strengths across this sort of deep level of experience and know-how across all these disciplines. And when you put many of those different capabilities together, it just enables us to do things like we've done in the last 12 months. So, the M&A examples, I think it was some really good examples sort of throughout the last 12, 24 months where we're really leveraging the best of what we've got across all of those different areas. And, when you put the whole together for the company, it's sort of worth more than the sum of the parts. And, it gives us a real strength in terms of how we continue to sort of build the platform going forward.
It's been a truly transformative past period for ASX JRV, but of course, 2022 is just ahead of us. I'd love just to hear what are those key growth drivers that you think investors should be watching for, both on a company lens as well as the macroeconomic outlook as well, potentially.
Yeah, look, I'll start with the company. From a company perspective, there's the release of the feasibility study at S&P that we spoke about, with the combination of studies happening there and further definition around the pathway. There's the ongoing mine development in Idaho and production and commissioning milestones that you'll see there in the second half as well. And then really in Finland, it's really that sort of watch on what we see in terms of the benefits of this upward movement in the cobalt price and the translation of that into earnings and cash flow. So I think those are sort of key from a company perspective. In terms of the wider macro landscape, the macro landscape, as you know, it's always got some surprises in. So I predict that we'll continue to see a number of further significant announcements, both from industry and OEMs and automakers on the progression, investment, and advancement of vehicle vehicle growth for electric vehicles and the related inputs into that, such as batteries, gigafactories, and other related developments. And then I think concurrently with that, what I'd be hopeful for is to see, again, a continuation and consolidation of the relevant sort of policy settings, really recognizing the role that governments can have in terms of really driving that acceleration of demand and all those enablers that are required, be it charging infrastructure or other ways in which government can lend their support to the growth trajectory as well.
It's a truly exciting sector. All eyes are on the move forward. Love just to hear any final reflections as well for ASX JRV shareholders who have potentially been following the story for a while, or maybe those new prospective shareholders who might be looking at Jervois moving forward into 2022. Any reflections you had to share with them?
Look, yes, just a couple of ways to sort of sum up. 2021 been a big year. We've had some good milestones, but got a lot more to do in 22. We've got some big milestones to hit, and absolutely focused on that as delivery. And then look, I think beyond that, I sort of stand by the opportunity. There is a big role for companies like ourselves providing this alternative in terms of how we service the sector going forward, and the opportunities in cobalt and nickel, I think, are going to be significant as we go forward, and we see that demand growth continue in EVs and the wider electrification sector. So that's the way I'd sum up. But feeling optimistic about 2022, and look forward to continuing to talk to investors through this and other forums as we go forward.
The decarbonisation trend and the electrification of fleets definitely has attracted a lot of ASX investors' attention. It's going to be fascinating to see where we head. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to hit the like button. Feel free to share it out. We make daily videos each and every day, so make sure you've subscribed and turn your bell notifications on. That's Jervois Global. It's ASX JRV. James May, the Chief Financial Officer. Thank you so much for joining us, mate. It's been a pleasure, and looking forward to having you back on sometime soon.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.